What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Scythe, and today I wanted to share my personal opinions of Anthem. I got to actually try out the VIP demo because a couple of my friends ended up pre-ordering Anthem, which ended up giving them access to the VIP demo, but they also ended up getting a bunch of extra codes, so me and a couple other guys ended up getting into the game, and it was really cool because, honestly speaking, going into this, I'm gonna tell you guys, I am not the type of person to get into the hype of video games. I got tricked years ago when Fable originally ended up coming out, and that was probably one of the most hyped games of all time during, during my years of gaming and stuff like that, right? Like back then it was probably more hyped than No Man's Sky. If not, I mean, No Man's Sky is kind of similar in the hype regard, I guess, but my point being is it kind of ruined it for me, where I knew that my imagination of what the game could have been was completely different than the reality, and it kind of shattered my expectations. And it kind of made me very humbled in the fact that afterwards, looking back, I actually still really liked Fable. It was a really good, solid RPG, and even No Man's Sky ended up being a pretty decent game for the simple fact that I didn't get overly crazy about it and sucked into the hype train that says it's going to be like the best game ever made. And Anthem is going to end up being the exact same. Like, I've seen people making posts and journalism, if you can even call it that in this day and age, having clickbait titles talking about how Anthem is going to be the best game of 2019 and stuff like that. And it's like, shut up, dude. It's the beginning of the year. No, it's not. Like, there's plenty of other games that are going to be coming out. But my point is that because I didn't get into the hype, it means that I can look at games at a very unbiased level. And that's what I think is going on right now, is a lot of biasism, because we've got EA being the publisher of a Bioware game, and people are just looking as an excuse to end up knocking on an EA game. That's what I think is mostly going on here, because what ended up happening with this VIP demo is that within the first few hours, their servers exploded. Apparently this was something unrelated to the servers themselves and more so an issue in the game that they couldn't end up discovering through internal testing. But in this day and age, let me tell you, this is nothing phenomenal. Like, obviously we were going to have crashes. It's very rare for a game to end up coming out and not dealing with server issues within the first day, let alone like all of the bugs and other issues that we were dealing with. Most notably was that during the demo build of the game, we would actually get stuck at 95% during a loading screen. And let me tell you, there's a lot of loading screens in this game. That's one critique I have about it, is that it's just got way too many. So hopefully the game is a little bit more optimized. But to be fair, this VIP demo was a version of the game from 6 weeks ago. So the version that we're going to be getting February 1st is going to be kind of a more recent version that I guess is supposed to have a lot of these bugs fixed and stuff like that. The devs have been very good with responding to tweets and messaging people and letting everybody know what the state of the game is and how they are very aware of these issues and are in the process of resolving them. Very nice to see a group of devs that is so responsive and not just giving robot responses that are kind of just trying to pretend that none of this is happening, you know what I mean? But the point that I'm trying to get at is I noticed that everybody just exploded. Like, the same sites of journalists saying that this was going to be the best game ever are now suddenly saying that this is going to be the worst game ever because of how bad a start it had. And it's like, dude, this is a VIP demo, which I know that doesn't really mean anything. My point is, that this is a demo version of the game. So there's a little bit of excuses and leeway there, because otherwise this would have happened with the normal launch of the game as well. So it's good that they had this little test to go underway. If the game launches and has all the same issues, then obviously there's no excuse and it's just EA doing their thing. I understand why people are wary of EA, but my point is that you gotta just kind of take a back seat to all of the craziness that's going on with the internet, because more so than ever with the internet right now, everyone just loves to exaggerate everything like crazy. And beyond all of that, let's just talk about the game, okay? Because never mind, I could just go on and on for hours about how stupid people are. But you guys know how this is, because if you've used the internet, you know people are generally kind of dumb when they talk. Like the idiot has the loudest mouth. That's what I always say. So anyways, going into this game completely blind, not giving into any of the hype, you know, I just saw a game that was something I could end up playing with my friends. And that is the biggest appeal to it. Not to mention, a lot of aspects of it reminded me of Warframe, Destiny 2, you know, and even a little bit of Diablo thrown in, but more so that's just the loot. That doesn't really have Destiny to it. Now, as much as people like to compare this game to Warframe, I'd say the comparison to Warframe is more so because Warframe has some open world maps, in which case it's fairly similar. Clearly Anthem is very inspired by these other games, and in a lot of ways doesn't really have anything original going for it, outside of the fact that the mobility of the characters and the 4 different classes all end up playing extremely well. I would say that, if anything, Anthem is more relatable to Borderlands than anything else, in that you're in kind of an open world area. You'll end up taking contracts or doing open world quests at random and stuff like that. And more so than that, I mean, the classes themselves are very, very distinct from one another in their playstyle. And it's really, really broad how you can end up approaching these characters, because they actually have quite a few different builds, and there actually seems to be quite a bit of depth to the game, which we didn't really get to experience this during the demo, but some leaked images and footage and stuff like that online suggested what some of the better mods and better perks are that you're going to be able to find on your characters. And it's going to kind of change the way that you play. Like, for example, I'm definitely going to be maining Colossus, and he's the tank character of the game. And I'll explain what the other characters are and their kind of role to play. But there's this mod that we ended up seeing. It's a legendary one, where it's like, as you end up doing a ground stomp attack, so you jump in the air and you do your melee attack and you slam down on the ground, what this mod would end up doing to your character, or this component as the game calls them, is it would give you a passive buff of every time you end up slamming on the ground, it would do an explosive attack. So that's really cool. One aspect of the game that I never really got into, like just because it was a little bit complicated for me and there wasn't enough time to learn it, is we've got this combo system involved with the game. So there's going to be 4 different elements. There's acid, fire, ice, and electricity. And the way that each of these works, very similar to Borderlands, is that ice and electricity are going to be good for taking down enemy shields, while fire and acid, I think those are the ones, are going to end up being a corrosive damage over time, or a dot that is going to end up doing damage directly to an enemy's health. And I think that's a really cool aspect, because it kind of forces certain characters to synergize very well, and almost all of the characters have the different elements, but maybe 1 or 2 of the elements won't be available to one of the classes, so that it promotes multiple play, or multiplayer, just playing with different classes, right? But the other thing that's really cool about it is that certain abilities will end up having a trigger and a detonation, or I don't know if that's a good example, or an activation and a trigger. Yeah, that's I think what they're called. So you'll end up having this ability that will activate, you know, kind of get a special combo ready. And then if another character ends up using a trigger move, that is going to have that effect on the enemy that is tagged explode and do a combo, which essentially is going to end up doing an extreme amount of damage. So you kind of got to learn which abilities go best together and kind of synergize and coordinate your attacks for how you can end up getting the most combos off. And most of all, this is going to have a part to play in the late game and the harder difficulty, which we didn't really get to experience much of that in this version of the demo. So in short, the way that the game works is it's going to be a 4-player co-op game that you are going to either be able to go into the open world, and you can end up doing random quests that will end up showing up, and this is going to end up giving you embers with varying rarity. These are items that are used to craft gear, so long as you end up having a blueprint or a recipe of the gear, and you end up getting those from doing the various raids and dungeons and stuff like that. While you can end up getting some rare weapon drops and stuff like that in the open world, more so you're going to end up just getting the embers themselves, and then by doing dungeons and doing raids and stuff like that, or strongholds as the game calls them, you're going to end up earning more gear rather than earning the embers. Now, if you end up dismantling a piece of gear, you're going to end up getting an ember of the same rarity, so that does end up having a part to play as well. It's not like you're not going to see the benefits of open world versus stronghold gameplay, but it's definitely worth it to end up doing both. And let me tell you, this game is beautiful, and the open world area that we got was considerable size. But one of the biggest things that I would say about the VIP demo is it made me immediately want more. You know, like, there was so many cool areas you could see in the distance that in the open world, and the demo would lock you out, and if you ended up going too far, it would just teleport you back to, you know, just before you ended up going to that out of bounds area. But there's so many cool things. There's so many different types of biomes than just the tree area that we ended up seeing in all of the Anthem footage and stuff. As far as I know, there's actually like an ice area and a lava area. I've seen these in screenshots and stuff like that. But anyways, let's talk about the classes, okay? So you got your Ranger. He's going to end up being kind of the basic general Marine. He just reminds me of Halo, or honestly, Iron Man. Like, straight up, you're going to have that little missile, homing missile thing that Iron Man has. You're going to be able to throw a grenade, and your ultimate ability on the character is kind of going to be where you trigger it and you target any enemies that are in your crosshairs, and then you shoot, and it's basically going to end up barraging all of the enemies that were tagged with missiles, which is going to do really good AoE damage and stuff like that. Then you got Interceptor, I think she's called, and that's kind of the faster javelin of the game. The mechs themselves are called javelins. And it's going to end up being the melee character. So a lot of your moves are kind of based on this whole run in quick, deal damage, and then run out, because you're kind of glassy in that you can end up dying really, really quick as this mech. But your ultimate ability is going to end up making it so that you end up doing like a ton of damage just with your melee attacks, and it's really, really cool. And the character spins around a lot, and generally each of the characters have a nice animation to them where they all feel exactly how they should. Like, this character feels very mobile, as opposed to the Colossus, which is the character that I'm gonna main, who is the tank and more focused on AoE damage. So I guess I would say the Ranger is more single target DPS. The Interceptor is kind of burst damage with a little bit of AoE. And then the Colossus is pretty much primarily focused on AoE, but he's not really going to do as much damage to a specific enemy. And then the Storm, which is going to be the last one that we'll talk about in a second, is kind of focused on elemental and status effect abilities, while also being very AoE driven and just generally being very good for DPS, but even more squishy. So with the Colossus, you're a tank. Quite literally, you actually have abilities where you can aggro all the enemies around you. Your ultimate is going to end up being pretty much just, you pull out this really big gun and you shoot 3 times. I call it screen shake, just because that's all it does, and for some reason you can't turn off the rumbles. Like, you literally can't see when you use this guy's attack. But onto the animations, this guy feels really big and cumbersome and heavy, and kind of like you're in a walking tank. And that's one of the biggest appeals to me with this game, is that all of the characters just feel really well, you know, really fleshed out with their movements and their playstyle. Even flying with the Colossus, you don't actually get to fly as long as the other characters before you end up overheating, just because he's that much heavier. And his run just feels very cumbersome and everything like that. And then there's the Storm character, and this guy's more focused on elemental damage, so he's going to be really good for taking down shields. And then depending on how you have him built, you know, maybe he's good for shields, maybe he's good for health, whatever, who knows. His ultimate ability is actually pretty neat in that it's going to cycle through 3 different elements, so you'll end up doing like a big tornado of damage that's gonna be like lightning and ice and poison and stuff, and it's just it's really cool. I don't remember exactly which elements. I don't think he's got fire going for him. Maybe he does, but I didn't really play the character that much because I didn't have much time to try it out in the VIP demo, because originally in the demo, we only had access to the Ranger at first, and then you got to level 12, and then you would gain access to one other Javelin of your choice. And then last minute, on the last day, they gave us access to all of the characters. And for all of the downtime, they said that they're going to end up giving us some exclusive skin for the characters, which actually looks pretty cool. It's kind of a green neon thing, but anyways, you don't care about that. The game itself, it was a lot of fun. Like, I really had a good time with it. I've got a couple videos of me just playing it with friends, and I would recommend this game for sure. It's actually very well developed, and the only complaints that I have is they got to fix that 95% loading screen error. Another uncommon bug that I did end up running into quite a few times was as soon as you get to a loading screen, it would just crash to desktop. So hopefully that ends up getting ironed out. And apparently optimization was a thing with this game where lots and lots of people were complaining about optimization. For myself personally, I'm rocking a pretty beefy computer, and when I'm recording videos, it actually takes even more resources, and I wasn't actually dealing with that many problems. I was getting pretty much steady 60 frames the entire time. Maybe here and there it would dip, but not very often at all. But again, like, I'm not the average player, at least when it comes to the PC version. I can't tell you if the console version had frame rate dips or anything, but apparently, you know, as February 1st comes out, we're going to be having a kind of more recent version of the game. It's not going to be the same as the final version that we'll get either February 22nd or February 14th if you end up doing the Origin Access or EA Premiere type thing, which I have another video talking about that altogether that I'll put in the description. But anyways, the next version of the game that we're going to be able to try out is February 1st. You guys and gals gotta mark this on your calendar, because this is going to be an absolutely free for everybody 3-day demo where you can experience the game for yourselves to find out if it's something that you're actually into. Because I wouldn't say that this game is for everybody. Generally, the gameplay is kind of slower, while at the same time, the mobility of the characters is insane. Like, right away, you end up learning that you know, the enemies are kind of going to end up flanking you very, very well. And because of it, you kind of have to really take advantage of the fact that you can fly at any time and just gotta go fast, right? So at first I was getting my butt kicked because I was trying to hide behind cover and stuff. And not to say that hiding behind cover isn't how you play this game, for sure it is. But because of the high level of mobility of each of the characters where you can just fly instantly, I found that the funnest style of play is you'll just be shooting at enemies from a bunch of rocks for a little bit, and then they'll start to flank you or they'll spawn behind you and stuff like that. And then you very easily, you gotta move as quick as you can and get behind another piece of cover in the environment. And it kind of forces this faster way of playing in an otherwise slower paced style of gunplay. You know what I mean? And it's just, it seemed really, really cool. So apparently this open beta version, I mean, can we call it an open beta? The game is releasing in like less than a month. I don't think that's enough time to say that it's a beta to a launched version, but in this other open beta version, for argumentative purposes, we'll just call it open beta because that's what they're all saying. In this version of the game, it's going to be a little bit more upgraded. So apparently it's going to have less bugs, and the flight controls are going to be a little bit different for PC players on mouse and keyboard, because I heard some people complaining about that. I, of course, am using a controller when playing this game because it just feels like that's what it was designed for originally. And then there's going to be the launch version of the game, which is going to have way better optimization. Apparently, you know, time will tell. We'll see what happens. And then there's also going to be a social hub area where you, you'll be able to actually go to a social area and 16 people, this is including yourself and your friends, will all be able to hang out and all be able to show off and look at your characters and see how cool you are and everything like that. Because as you're probably sitting there wondering and scratching your head, well, it's EA, so how are they going to end up monetizing this game? It seems like they're going the Fortnite route, which personally I think that this is the best way possible that they can end up approaching games from this moment on, just with single player type, or not single player, but just focused experience types of games like this, is their monetization is set up in the form of cosmetic items. So you're going to be able to change the texture of your mech, the colors of your mech, vinyls of your mech, and all of this stuff, right? But the thing that's cool about Anthem is that while there is the cash shop equivalent of shards, you spend real money to end up getting this currency to end up buying vanity items, there is also going to end up being coins that you can end up earning through in-game actions of doing bounties, doing missions and stuff like that. And that's going to be like your free-to-play way of unlocking skins and stuff like that. So it's cool that they have the two options, because otherwise it would be a little bit, you know, I mean, we're still talking about EA here, so of course they're selling the game at a $60 price tag. That's US dollars, by the way. And then on top of that, expecting you to spend money for vanity items. So that would be really, really bad, except we do have the free-to-play way of earning all of the vanity items. So to me, that's perfectly fine. Honestly, I'm fine with dropping down some extra dollars to end up getting some vanity items in games. I'm not against it, but having a free-to-play equivalent, I think, is detrimental and really going to help out with the longevity of this game. Now, who knows how long this game's going to end up lasting. Its popularity is kind of just coming and going. You know, everybody in this day and age, like, there's so many options for games nowadays that people just kind of move on really, really quickly. So we'll see whether Anthem ends up lasting more than 3 months. It honestly depends how much endgame content the devs can end up pumping out, because we all know that players just rush to the end, and that's that. But as far as the experience that I had, I loved it. I wanted more. I was actually a skeptic of Anthem. I didn't think that it was going to end up being anything cool. I wasn't going to pre-order it. I wasn't even considering buying it in the first place. But thankfully, I got to try out this demo, and my goodness gracious, like, it is right up my alley. I love this game, and I'm definitely going to end up covering it on the channel for sure. So anyways, this video has gone on pretty long, but I did want to voice my opinion about it because there's a lot of naysayers out there, and I honestly don't know why. I think it's just because it's EA and people are just being very biased and kind of ignorant towards the whole thing. Not to mention, it's like, most people that are complaining about Anthem, in all honesty, guys, they haven't even played it. So, you know, I can understand their frustration with the game crashing as much as it did, not to mention getting stuck in loading screens, and then the few hours at the beginning where people couldn't even log into the server. But again, it's like, I've come to expect this. Like, any veteran gamer knows that this is just a part of gaming these days, especially with online games. And once again, this is the demo, so I kind of think it's okay. I mean, technically you had to buy access into the demo that we experienced last week, sure. But if they can iron most of that stuff out for the open demo that we're going to end up getting soon, you know, February 1st, then by all means, I think we got a hit on our hands, and something that I'm definitely going to enjoy for as long as I can. Either way, that's it from me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Very much appreciate it. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Again, if you're still uncertain about this game, if you still don't really know what it's about, you can play it February 1st for 3 days. It's going to be available for everybody on Xbox One, PS4, and PC. You're going to be able to download it, try it out for yourselves, and find out whether or not it's a game that you actually like or not. Either way, I appreciate you watching, and would also appreciate if you would hit that like button. Thanks for watching. Sayonara, and stay epic, everybody.